It was a warm Monday morning. Sun reflected off the glass walls of a tall office building in the heart of the city. Expensive cars rolled by. People in suits rushed inside, carrying laptops, coffee cups, and confident smiles. But just outside, the building's entrance, a man stood still. He was tall, well-dressed, and calm. His suit was sharp, his shoes polished, and his posture straight. He looked like he belonged to the world inside that building, but no one invited him in. For several minutes, he stood quietly by the door, holding nothing but a small black folder. Under one arm, inside the lobby, the receptionist looked up once, then quickly looked back at her phone. She didn't say anything. She didn't ask if he needed help. She didn't smile. She simply ignored him. Behind her desk, two other young employees walked by and noticed him standing through the glass. One of them, a blonde woman, laughed quietly. Another walk-in? "Why do they always come here thinking this is a public place?" she whispered. "Maybe he's delivering something," the man next to her joked, "or applying for janitor work." They both laughed and walked away. Outside, the man remained still. His eyes were calm. But if you looked closely, there was something deeper behind them, like he was watching, remembering, and measuring everything. Across the street, a small cafe. Across the street, a man named Daniel sat at the window, sipping coffee and watching the building. He had worked in that same company 5 years ago, but left after being passed over for a well. Promotion 3 times. He saw the man standing outside. He recognized the quiet strength in his body language. He leaned closer to the glass and whispered to himself, "That's not just any man." He didn't know his name, but he knew this man wasn't ordinary. Inside the building, the office was full of energy. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. People spoke loudly, confidently, in the break room. Few employees gathered to talk about the weekend. "Did you see that guy at the door?" Someone said. "Oh yeah," another laughed. "He's been standing there for 10 minutes, I think. He's lost." "No, I think he's waiting for someone." "Well, someone better tell him this is a private building." None of them moved. Back at the front desk, the receptionist finally sighed. She stood up and walked toward the glass door. She opened it halfway and looked at the man. "Excuse me, sir, are you here for something?" she asked in a tone that wasn't exactly polite. The man turned slightly and gave a small smile. "I'm here for a meeting." "With who?" He paused, then answered simply, "I believe they'll know when they see me." She frowned. "Sorry, I can't let you in without a name or appointment." "It's fine," he said calmly. "Wait right here." He stepped back. She gave a fake smile, nodded quickly, and went back inside. She didn't ask for his name. She didn't check the schedule. She just assumed he wasn't important. Security noticed in the control room. Security cameras covered every corner of the building. One of the guards leaned forward. "Hey, who's that man outside?" "It's just standing there," another shrugged. "Probably a client or someone lost. We should go check." A minute later, a tall security guard walked through the lobby and pushed open the front door. Stepped out slowly, adjusting his earpiece. "Good. Morning, sir," the guard said. "Can I help you with something?" The man nodded. "Thank you. I'm here for a meeting." "No, you have the name of the person you're meeting?" "No, but I promise they know I'm coming." The guard hesitated. This man didn't look like a threat. In fact, he looked like someone important. But still, the rules were the rules. "All right, sir. We'll go ask reception," the guard said. The man nodded again, without any frustration. Meanwhile, upstairs on the top floor, a young manager named Carl walked into his boss's office. "Hey, we've got an open schedule this morning. Anything you want me to handle?" The older man behind the desk shook his head. "Nah, let's use this time to prep for the investor call later." Carl nodded and sat down. But then, something strange happened. The older man opened his drawer, pulled out a black envelope, and stared at it. "Actually," he whispered, "there was something I forgot." Back at the front desk, the receptionist rolled her eyes as the security guard walked back in. "He says he's here for a meeting." "Oh," the guard said. The receptionist waved it off. "Oh. No one told me anything. Probably a mistake. He can wait." "No one comes, he'll leave." "You sure?" the guard asked. Trust me, she said, going back to her phone. The man waits. Minutes passed. People came and went. No one greeted him. Still the man stood calmly. He looked at the building, the people, the glass that separated him from the world inside, and he waited. One kind, Soleil young cleaning woman named Maria was walking by when she saw the man. She looked twice, then stopped. She opened the door carefully. Sir, are you okay? Do you need anything? He smiled. No, thank you. You're very kind. She nodded. It's just, I see people ignoring you. That doesn't feel right. He looked into her eyes. You noticed. That's what matters. She blinked, a little confused. Are you someone important? He chuckled softly. Not yet. I might be in a few minutes. Then he did something strange. He whispered something into her ear. Maria's eyes widened. She looked at him again, her expression changing from confusion to realization, to respect. Then she turned and walked inside, quickly, as if she had a mission. Daniel leaves the CAFO across the street. Daniel stood up and dropped some money on the table. He couldn't explain it, but something told him this was going to be a big day. As he stepped outside, he saw 2 black cars slowly pull up to the curb. Beside the man, the driver stepped out and opened the door, but the man didn't enter. Instead, he turned and finally walked toward the building. Inside, the elevator opens. Maria rushed up to the receptionist. Hey, that man outside, he's not just anyone. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. You talked to him? Yes, Maria said. Need to tell your manager right now, or it'll be too late. But before she could answer, the elevator dinged. The doors opened, and the man confident stepped inside. As the doors closed, he pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator moved slowly. Inside, the man stood tall and still. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, like someone who had waited a long time for this moment. Floor after floor passed. No one else entered. On the top floor, the elevator stopped. The doors opened. He stepped out into a hallway filled with glass doors, modern lights, and polished wood. A few employees saw him, but no one said anything. Some looked confused. Some looked nervous. Few acted like he didn't exist. He walked forward with quiet confidence. But downstairs, chaos was just beginning. Back in the lobby, Maria, the cleaning woman, was now arguing with the receptionist. I'm telling you, she said firmly, that man is someone powerful. I don't know who he is, but I can feel it. And you treated him like dirt. The receptionist rolled her eyes. Maria, he was standing there doing nothing. What was I supposed to do? Roll out a red carpet? You didn't even ask his name, Maria replied. You didn't care? The security guard stepped in. She's right. We should have checked more carefully. That guy didn't act like a regular visitor. The receptionist waved them off. Whatever. If he was that important, someone would have said something. Just then, her computer pinged. A message popped up on her screen. Please send Mr. Reynolds to the executive boardroom immediately. She froze. Wait, Mr. Reynolds? She whispered. Who's that? Maria crossed her arms. That's him. The file no one opened upstairs. Inside the HR office, a young assistant named Julie was flipping through folders. She saw a thick black file with gold letters on the front. Confidential? R. Reynolds? She opened it out of curiosity. Her eyes widened. There were pages and pages of achievements. Degrees, military service, tech investments, major companies listed as acquired. One photo showed the same man standing with world leaders at a global conference. Julie gasped and grabbed her phone. Why didn't anyone tell us he was coming? No one answered. It was too late. Meeting room confusion on the top floor. The CEO, Mr. Adams, was sitting at the long glass table in the executive boardroom. Around him were other directors, investors, and senior staff. He looked at his assistant. Where's Mr. Reynolds? I think he's already in the building, she stammered. You think, snapped, we're supposed to welcome him at the door? At that moment, the door opened, and in walked the man they had made wait outside. Silence in the room. The man looked around the boardroom. No one spoke. Some of the staff looked surprised. Others looked guilty. A few tried to fake a smile, but Mr. Adams stood up and smiled nervously. "Mr. Reynolds, welcome. We've been expecting you." The man didn't smile back. He simply pulled out the black folder from under his arm and placed it on the table. "I believe there's a lot we need to talk about," he said quietly. The room fell silent. Flashback. 1 week ago, a week before, in a secret meeting, Mr. Adams was on a video call with 3 board members. They were discussing company ownership, new partners, silent investors. That's when one of them said there's one person interested in a major stake. If we approve, he'll become the largest shareholder. Mr. Adams raised an eyebrow. "Who is it?" "Raymond Reynolds," the man replied. "He's worth billions. Tech background. Very private. Wants to visit the office himself before finalizing." Mr. Adams agreed. But he never imagined Mr. Reynolds would come without warning, or that he'd be black, or that he'd be the man everyone ignored at the door. Back to presenting the boardroom. Mr. Reynolds sat down slowly. "You asked me to come quietly, to see how your staff behaves, to see if this company reflects its values." He looked at each person in the room. "I was treated like a nobody." One director cleared his throat. "I'm sure it was just a mistake." Reynolds didn't flinch. "No, it was a pattern." He slid the black folder across the table. "Inside, you'll find every name, every word spoken, every face I saw. I didn't come here to inspect your numbers. I came to inspect your character." Nervous faces news started spreading across the office. "Did you hear? The man we left outside, he's the new investor?" "No, he's more than that. They say he OWNs the company now." People who had laughed were now afraid. Some employees who had ignored him started whispering apologies behind his back, but it was too late. Maria's moment. Maria was called upstairs. She stepped into the boardroom with shaking hands. Mr. Reynolds stood and smiled. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Maria looked around the table full of powerful people, then back at Mr. Reynolds. "I just did what felt right, sir." "You did what no one else did," he replied. "Treated me like a human being. The CEO tries to fix it, Mr." Adams leaned forward. "Mr. Reynolds, I deeply apologize. We didn't know." Reynolds looked him straight in the eye. "You didn't need to know to be kind." He stood up. "This meeting is over. I'll be sending my decision shortly." Just like that, he walked out of the room. Back at the elevator, doors opened again. People stood aside. No one dared block his way now. He stepped inside. No words, no anger, just power and silence. The first email 5 minutes later. Everyone in the building received the same message from R. Reynolds' subject. "New changes effective immediately. Several staff members have been terminated for behavior that goes against our values. A new leadership structure will be shared soon. This company will be rebuilt on respect art." Reynolds outside the building, Mr. Reynolds walked back into the sunlight. Daniel from the cafe watched him pass. He smiled and nodded. Reynolds gave a small nod back. He got into the black car and disappeared down the street. But his message stayed behind. The office lobby was no longer loud and carefree. It was quiet now. The laughter had stopped. People typed more carefully. Phones were answered with nervous energy. Whispers floated through the air like shadows. Everyone had seen the email. Everyone knew the man they thought was a janitor now owned the company. The fear spread Zella. The receptionist who had told Mr. Reynolds to wait outside sat frozen in her chair. Her hands were shaking. She kept rereading the email. Terminated for behavior that goes against our values. G. Looked up at the security guard. "Do you think he meant me?" The guard didn't answer. He just looked away. 2 employees whispering the hallway near the break room. 2 junior employees, Ryan and Claire, were having a quiet conversation. Claire leaned in. "That's the same man we saw outside, right?" Ryan nodded, his face pale. "We laughed. I even called him a delivery guy." Claire swallowed hard. "We're done. He probably heard everything." They looked around, hoping no one had overheard them now. Someone was watching, but someone had. Mr. Wells, the oldest employee in the company, stood silently near the copy machine. He had worked here for 25 years. Everyone called him Old Man Wells. Didn't talk much, he just watched, and when he spoke, people listened. He stepped toward Ryan and Claire. "You two forgot the most important thing," he said. Ryan blinked. "What's that?" Wells looked them both in the eye. "Respect. That's what you forgot." And then he walked away, shaking his head slowly. Flashback. What the man heard earlier that morning before the boardroom meeting. Before the email, Mr. Reynolds had stood just outside the main lobby, behind the tall glass. He heard them laugh. He heard them whisper. He saw how no one offered help. And he remembered what it felt like to be invisible. He remembered being the only black kid in his school, the only black engineer in his team. The only one never invited to dinner, never given the benefit of the doubt, but this time was different. This time, he held the power. Inside the elevator upstairs, Mr. Reynolds stood inside his new office, a large one, with windows overlooking the city. The desk was untouched. The walls lined with awards and company photos. He didn't sit yet. Instead, he stared out the window. Behind him, Maria stood holding a tray of tea. He turned. "Maria," I said gently, "you may not realize it yet, but you saved this company." She shook her head, smiling nervously. "I only treated you with respect, that's all." "And that," he said, "is more than most did." Opened a folder and pulled out a list of names. Maria recognized some of them. "I want you to help me rebuild this place," he said. Her eyes widened. "Me? You saw people's hearts before their job titles," he said. "That's the kind of vision I need." She nodded, still in shock. The whisper spreads downstairs. The rumors grew stronger. They say he's going to fire half the staff. No, just the ones who treated him badly. Did you see what he was driving? That car alone costs more than my house. People who used to gossip and joke were now quiet, watching every word they said. But the whisper that truly shook the building was this: he was testing us the whole time. Another flashback. The Testone a week earlier, in a quiet meeting room. Mr. Reynolds spoke with the company's founder, Mr. Harper, now retired. Harper had been worried. "The board doesn't treat people right," he said. "They've turned this company cold and proud." Reynolds had nodded. "Let me walk through the front door. No name, no suit, no power. Let's see how they react." Harper raised an eyebrow. "You'd do that?" Reynolds smiled. "It's the only way to know who they really are." And Harper agreed. That's how it started. The call for HR in the HR department. Julie, the assistant who found Mr. Reynolds' file, was now going through employee records. Her boss, Mr. Clive, walked in looking stressed. "We have to fix this," he said. "Start listing names, anyone who mocked him, anyone who failed to follow protocol." Julie frowned. "What about Ella at reception?" Clive sighed. "Start with her." Julie hesitated. "Shouldn't we give people a chance to explain?" Clive shook his head. He's not going to wait. Ella's apology, meanwhile. Ella stood alone outside the building. She had stepped out for air, but now wasn't sure she should go back in. She saw a black car waiting nearby, same one Mr. Reynolds had arrived in. Slowly, she walked toward it. She didn't know if he was inside, but she whispered toward the window anyway. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to judge. I was just busy. I wasn't thinking." There was no response. The window didn't roll down. She turned and walked away with tears in her eyes. Upstairs. A decision made. Mr. Reynolds sat at the desk now, reading every employee's report from that morning. One by one, he placed names into 3 columns. Keep Warren, let go. His eyes were sharp. His heart steady. He wasn't doing this for revenge. He was doing it for the future of the company. "I won't build a business on people who smile up and kick down," he said to himself. The whisper becomes a storm by the end of the day. 5 people were called into the HR office. 3 were fired on the spot. 2 were warned and placed under observation, others waited in fear. But the biggest shock came just before 5 p.m. when an email went out. Maria Gonzalez has been promoted to Director of Employee Relations. People gasped. The cleaning woman, the one they barely noticed, now sat in a private office, across from the new CEO. Ryan and Claire tried to fix things. Ryan and Claire approached Maria the next morning. They looked nervous, holding coffee cups. "Hey," Ryan said, "we just wanted to say congrats." Maria nodded politely. Claire added, "And we're sorry. We didn't know who he was." Maria looked at them kindly but firmly. "You shouldn't treat people with kindness just because they're powerful. You should treat people with kindness because it's right." They both nodded, quietly ashamed. End of the day, as the sun went down. The building felt different. Quieter, stronger, cleaner, not in appearance, but in energy. The people who stayed knew why. They had survived the test. And the whisper in the lobby had become a message written across every wall of that company. You never know who you're talking to, so always be kind. The building looked the same as it always had: glass windows, shining floors, and polished suits walking by in every direction. But something was different now. The energy had changed. People walked a little slower, spoke a little softer, and looked at each other more carefully. No more loud jokes in the hallway. No more ignoring strangers at the door, because now everyone knew. The man who had stood outside in silence was the owner, and the building had failed his quiet test. A quiet office upstairs, in a small room once used as a storage area. Maria sat at her new desk. She still couldn't believe it. Just 2 days ago, she was cleaning bathrooms and emptying trash cans. She was the Director of Employee Relations. With a nameplate on the door and an assistant at her side, she opened her inbox. A message from Mr. Reynolds was sitting at the top. Subject: one file still missing, Maria. In the archives, there's a file from 5 years ago. It's mine, back when I applied here and never got a reply. Find it for me. Let's show them what they missed. R.R. She leaned back in her chair, eyes wide. Down in the archives, Maria went to the lower level, an old room filled with filing cabinets, dust, and forgotten records. Most of the files hadn't been touched in years. New hires came through digital systems now. But 5 years ago, it was still all paper. She opened a drawer marked Applicants, Year 5, and began flipping through. Her fingers stopped on one file. Raymond Reynolds' black folder. Thick pages. A golden clip at the top. She opened it slowly, and then her heart sank. What was inside the file were a resume that showed degrees from top universities, military service with medals of honor, letter of recommendation from a global tech CEO, a personal statement that read, "I believe companies grow stronger when they give voices to those unheard." And at the bottom of the resume, a red stamp, not considered, no corporate experience. Maria stared at the stamp for a long time. They had rejected him without reading the rest. Flashback. 5 years ago was a rainy Monday. A younger Raymond Reynolds walked into the same building, holding a folder with both hands. He had no expensive suit, no big car, no name tag that opened doors. He had a dream. He waited at the front desk. He smiled kindly, but the receptionist barely looked up. "Leave your resume. We'll call if needed." He placed the file in the tray and said thank you. She didn't even reply. He walked out. Into the rain. Unnoticed, back to present, Maria held the folder in her hands and took the elevator up to Mr. Reynolds' office. She stepped inside. "I found it," she said softly. He looked up, his face calm but his eyes tired. She placed the folder on his desk. He opened it and stared at the red stamp. He chuckled, not in joy, but in sadness. "They didn't even read it." Maria nodded. "I was told I wasn't corporate enough," he said, "so I built my own company. And now I own this one." A meeting called that afternoon. Mr. Reynolds sent out another message. Subject: special meeting. All managers must attend 5 p.m. Conference room A. We will talk about missed talent and missed chances. What was this meeting about? Was he going to fire more people? The conference room fills at exactly 5 p.m. The room was packed. Department heads, senior managers, HR, even Mr. Clive, who had once laughed when someone asked about diversity hiring, was there. Mr. Reynolds stood at the front. No slideshow, no fancy screen, just the black folder in his hand. "This," he said, holding it up, "is my resume from 5 years ago." People sat up straighter. "I applied here. I wasn't famous. I wasn't rich. I just believed in this company." He opened the folder and read the red stamp out loud. "Not considered, no corporate experience." The room went silent. He continued speaking. "I had experience. I had ideas. I had heart. But someone, maybe many of you, ever gave me a chance." He looked around the room, meeting their eyes one by one. "You see someone's name? There. Face. And you make a decision. You don't look deeper. And that's how companies die, not from numbers, but from blindness." No one dared interrupt him. He walked to the whiteboard and wrote 2 words. "How many?" "How many other resumes did we throw away?" he asked. "Many great minds walked through our doors and were told they didn't fit." Managers looked at each other, ashamed. The truth comes out. One brave manager stood up. Her name was Leah. She had been with the company for 8 years. "I remember that year," she said. "We had an old rule: if someone didn't have big company experience, we skipped their file." She paused. "I didn't agree with it. But I didn't fight it either. And I'm sorry." Mr. Reynolds nodded. "Thank you for your honesty." He looked around the room again. "If we're going to change, it starts now." A new policy, announced Mr. Reynolds. Handed Maria a sheet of paper. She walked to the front and read it aloud. "Effective today, no resume will be rejected without being fully read. Any hiring decision must include a written reason. Any candidate who shows heart, skill, or purpose must be interviewed no matter where they come from." People began to nod. A few even clapped. This wasn't just about one man's pain. This was about everyone who had ever been ignored. Later that evening, as people left the conference room, conversations began to change. No more jokes, no more gossip. People talked about their own pastimes when they were overlooked, times when someone else gave them a chance, a quiet moment alone in his office. Mr. Reynolds stood again by the window. Maria stepped in. "You did the right thing today," she said. He smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for me. I did it for the next person who walks in that door, the one nobody sees." He looked at the empty folder one last time. Then he placed it in a glass case, labeled "The Resume They Ignored," and hung it on the wall of the front lobby for everyone to see. The morning after the big meeting, the company felt different. People showed up earlier, and doors were held open. Good morning was said more often, and meant sincerely. Something had shifted, but even though the air felt lighter, the tension had not disappeared. Everyone knew Mr. Reynolds was still watching. Every word, every action. New face in the lobby, a young man named Jordan stood near the front door, holding a small folder and wearing his best suit. He looked nervous, sweaty, and out of place. He wasn't an employee, not yet. He was there for an internship interview, but he had arrived early, so early that the receptionist told him to wait. "Sit over there," she said flatly, pointing to a bench by the glass wall. Jordan nodded and sat down, clutching his folder with both hands. He watched people walk by, confident, dressed perfectly, joking like they belonged. He looked down at his own secondhand shoes and felt small. The elevator door opens at that moment. Mr. Reynolds entered the building. He didn't come through the private entrance this time. He walked through the main door just like any other employee. He saw Jordan immediately. Jordan stood up. "Good morning, sir," he said quickly, not even knowing who the man was. Mr. Reynolds smiled softly. "First day." Jordan nodded. "Interview, Mr. Reynolds glanced at the elevator. "Come with me."
"Oh."
Jordan's eyes widened. "Sorry, me?" "Yes," Reynolds replied. "Already walking." Jordan followed. Inside the elevator, they stepped inside. The doors closed. Jordan stared ahead, unsure whether to speak. Reynolds looked at him and asked, "Nervous?" Nodded quickly. "Very." Reynolds smiled. "Good. It means you care." There was a pause. Then Jordan asked, "What if I mess up?" Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "What if you don't?" Jordan blinked. Reynolds continued, "Let me tell you a secret. The ones who worry about failing are usually the ones who rise fastest. You just need someone to believe in you." Jordan's eyes filled with hope. "Do you believe in yourself?" Reynolds asked. Jordan whispered, "Sometimes." Reynolds replied, "Make that every time." The elevator denned. They stepped out. Reynolds looked at him one last time and said, "Whatever happens in that interview, remember, your value doesn't depend on this building. You had it before you walked in." Then he turned and walked away. A new kind of confidence. Jordan stood frozen for a second. Then he exhaled and smiled. He didn't know who the man was, but his words had changed something deep inside. The interview room. Inside the conference room, 3 people sat across from Jordan. The 2 looked bored. One looked at his watch. "You're early," one of them said, flipping through Jordan's thin resume. Jordan sat up straight. "Yes, sir. I didn't want to be late." The man sighed. "No college degree?" Jordan shook his head. "No, sir. I couldn't afford it. But I studied online, took courses, and built 3 apps by myself." The woman beside him looked unimpressed. "That's nice. But we need real-world experience." Jordan paused. Then he remembered the words from the elevator. "Your value doesn't depend on this building." And for the first time in his life, he spoke up for himself. "I may not have a degree," he said, "but I know how to work hard. How to learn fast, and how to build something from nothing." There was silence in the room. Then the door opened. "A surprise visitor, Mr. Act." Reynolds stepped in. The interviewer stood up instantly. "Sir, we didn't expect." Reynolds waved a hand. "I just wanted to check on the candidate." He looked at Jordan. Then he turned to the panel. "This young man," he said, "just rode up with me." He spoke, "And I've made my decision." He turned to Jordan again. "You're hired." Jordan's jaw dropped. The panel looked confused, but, "Sir, protocol." "I am the protocol," Reynolds said simply. Jordan's first step the next day. Jordan arrived early again. This time, he didn't wait on the bench. He walked through the lobby, head high, holding his employee badge. He had a desk, a team, a mentor, and a new suit. But most of all, he had belief. Back to the elevator later that week. Mr. Reynolds rode the elevator again alone this time. He stared at the floor numbers. Then at his reflection. He thought about all the elevators he'd been in throughout his life. Ones where people ignored him. Ones where people looked him up and down. Ones where people spoke to him like he didn't belong. But now the elevator was his, and he would use it to lift others. A message to all staff that afternoon. Another email arrived. Subject: Elevator policy. We rise together. To every employee, no matter their role, deserves kindness and respect. From now on, our elevators are a symbol not of status, but of unity. Say hello, offer help, share wisdom. You never know whose life you might lift. Employees read it in silence. Some smiled, some reflected, and some finally understood. What kind of man now led their company? The cleaning staff reads it in the janitor's closet. Bria shared the email with the team. An older cleaner named Carlos wiped his eyes. "No one's ever written something like that for us." Maria smiled. "That's because no one like him ever sat in that chair before." Jordan, at the end of the day, Jordan entered the elevator again. He looked at the silver walls and smiled. A new journey had begun, and it had all started with a secret in the elevator. It was Thursday morning. The office building buzzed with quiet energy. People typed, whispered, and checked emails like they were walking on glass. Ever since Mr. Reynolds had taken over, things weren't the same. They were better, but also more real. Every employee knew. You could no longer hide behind your title. You had to be kind. You had to be human. And yet one small accident was about to test everyone. Meet Emily, the intern. Emily was new. 19, bright, nervous. She had just joined as a marketing intern. It was her third day. She wore simple clothes, carried a second-hand laptop, and held her favorite mug that said, "One day at a time." She wasn't rich. She wasn't from a big college. She was just trying to learn and survive. That morning, her manager had sent her to get coffee for the team. She didn't like being sent around like a servant, but she smiled and obeyed. She held a tray with 5 hot drinks as she entered the elevator. The elevator stopped at the next floor. A man in a black suit stepped in. Emily didn't look closely. She just backed into the corner. Balancing the tray with both hands, the man looked at her kindly but said nothing. As the elevator rose, it jerked slightly. Just enough Emily lost balance. The tray tilted, and hot coffee spilled all over the man's shirt and suit. "Time," freezes Emily gasped. She dropped the tray and reached into her bag for tissues. "I'm so sorry. Oh no, I didn't mean, please don't fire me, I'll pay." For it pleased, her voice cracked. Her eyes filled with tears. She still hadn't looked at his face. The man slowly looked down at his soaked clothes, then back at her. He smiled. "It's okay." She looked up, finally seeing his face, and froze. Mr. Reynolds, panic in her eyes, Emily stepped back, nearly tripping. "I didn't know it was you. I'm so sorry, please." "I didn't mean." Mr. Reynolds gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, it's just coffee." Her eyes widened. "You know my name?" Nodded. "I read every intern file before your first day." "I liked your letter." She couldn't believe it. "You did?" "Yes," he said. "You wrote, 'I may not have experience, but I have hunger, and I learn fast.' That stayed with me." The elevator stops, the doors opened. People were waiting. They saw Emily. They saw Mr. Reynolds, his shirt soaked in brown coffee, and they gasped. Some stepped back. A senior executive whispered, "She's done for." But Mr. Reynolds calmly walked out, coffee stains and all, and said, "Accidents don't fire people. Attitude does." And just like that, he walked away. Whispers in the hall. The news spread like wildfire. "Did you hear?" An intern spilled coffee on the CEO. "What happened?" He just smiled. He smiled. "Yeah," and then complimented her cover letter. "Who is this guy?" Flashback. A different time many years ago, a younger Reynolds worked at a law firm. One day, he accidentally knocked over coffee on the CEO's desk. The CEO didn't smile. He yelled, humiliated him, made him clean it with his tie. Reynolds was fired the next morning. He never forgot how that felt, and he promised himself, "If I ever get the power, I'll never use it to embarrass someone weaker." That's why he smiled at Emily, because he remembered. Emily in the break room. Emily sat in the break room, still shaking. A few people came up, unsure of what to say, but then Maria walked in and sat beside her. He smiled. She asked gently. Emily nodded. "Then don't cry anymore," Maria said. "That man, he knows pain, and that's why he gives grace." What you weigh? Message sent company-wide at that afternoon. Another email landed in every inbox. Subject: about the coffee. Spilling coffee is human. Showing kindness is leadership. Never shame someone for a mistake. Ask if they're okay. That's the culture we're building. A Reynolds below the message, he added. Also, if anyone can remove coffee stains from a black suit, let me know. People smiled. Some laughed. But everyone got the message. The executive learns a lesson in his corner office. Mr. Clive, the same one who had rolled his eyes at interns for years, read the message twice. He stood up, walked to the intern area, and found Emily. He cleared his throat. "I've been cold to new hires," he admitted. "I want to change that. Would you like to join the marketing meeting next week? We could use fresh ideas." Emily blinked. "Me? Really?" "Yes," he said. "Mr. Reynolds is right. We all learn faster when we're kind." Later that night, Mr. Reynolds sat alone in his office, sipping tea this time. No stains. Just peace. He opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo himself at 22, holding a mop in a storage room after being fired for a spilled coffee. He smiled to himself and whispered, full circle. In the lobby on the way out, he passed Emily again. This time, she held the door open for him. She smiled. "Thank you for not making me feel small." He smiled back. "You're not small," he said. "You're just getting started." The days passed quickly after the coffee incident, but the effects lingered. People smiled more, apologized more. It didn't just work, they noticed each other now. But there were still many stories inside that building. And Mr. Reynolds wasn't done uncovering them. A quiet presence at the door every morning. The same man stood near the front entrance, wearing a navy blue uniform, name tag. James, he didn't speak much. He didn't smile often. He just did his job watching, listening, standing tall. Most employees walked past him like he was part of the wall, but not Mr. Reynolds. Every morning, he nodded at James. And every morning, James nodded back. No words, just respect. The memory. Returns one night, Mr. Reynolds sat at his desk, thinking that his eyes narrowed as he remembered something. The day he stood outside the building, ignored by the receptionist, laughed at by staff. One person had stepped forward quietly, not to ask questions, not to show off, but to protect the security. Guard Mr. Reynolds remembered it clearly now. James had walked toward him slowly, looked him in the eye, and said, "Everything okay, sir? Need me to check inside for you?" It was the only act of kindness the dad besides Maria's, and yet no one had talked about him since. A quick call to HR the next morning, Mr. Reynolds called Maria. "I need James' file. Security." "James?" she asked, surprised. "Yes. Find out how long he's been here." "What he's done." "Everything." Maria nodded and went to work. What the file revealed later that afternoon. Maria placed a folder on Mr. Reynolds' desk. It was thin. "It's thin. I think you need to see this for yourself," she said. Inside the file read, James Carter position. Contract security officer, years served. 14, not eligible for promotion. Third-party hire, no formal complaints. No recognition, no reviews. Mr. Reynolds frowned. 14 years and no promotion? No review? Nothing. Maria shook her head. He's invisible on paper. Digging deeper, Reynolds wasn't satisfied. He made a few calls, spoke to old staff, checked security footage archives, looked at every report James had submitted over the years, and slowly, a picture formed. James wasn't just a guard. He had stopped 3 robberies, helped a woman who fainted in the elevator, escorted a panicking, interned to safety during a fire drill, even found a missing USB drive during a legal crisis. But every time he waved off credit, just doing my job, he'd say, "No awards, no bonuses, not even a thank you email." A secret visit that night. Mr. Reynolds stayed late. As usual, James was. Still at his post, Mr. Reynolds walked to the front desk. "James," he said. The guard stood up straight. "Evening, sir." "Walk with me." James looked surprised, of course. They walked out to the quiet sidewalk. City lights flickered. The air was cool. Mr. Reynolds asked, "Why are you still here?" James raised an eyebrow. "You mean on the job?" "Yes," James chuckled softly. "It's honest work. Someone has to keep people safe. I don't need applause. You ever ask for more?" James shrugged. "Once, a long time ago. They told me I wasn't company staff, said I should be grateful to just stay." Mr. Reynolds nodded slowly. "They were wrong," he said. The announcement the next morning, new company-wide email appeared. Subject, security hero for 14 years. James Carter has quietly protected this building, its people, and its future. He's never asked for thanks. But today we give it anyway. The email listed every incident James had responded to over the years. At the bottom, it read, "Effective immediately. James Carter is now head of corporate security. He is an official company employee with full benefits. His badge is upgraded, his salary doubled, his office is being prepared. Some heroes wear suits, others wear navy blue and carry radios. Either way, we see you now." Standing ovation at the morning meeting. Mr. Reynolds surprised everyone by inviting James in. The staff rose to their feet. People clapped. Some whistled. Maria wiped a tear from her eye. "James, stood frozen. He'd never heard his name shouted like that before. Later in his new office, James walked into the new office on the 3rd floor. Simple desk, security monitors. Fresh paint on the wall was a framed quote, "Quiet strength is still strength." And beside it, a letter from Mr. Reynolds. "You protected me when no one knew my name. Now I protect you." R. Reynolds flashed back. A promise made years ago. James sat in a hospital waiting room. His daughter had asked him, "Why do you keep doing that job, Dad? They don't even notice you." He smiled and said, "I don't do it to be noticed. I do it so people feel safe, if I'm when they don't realize it." She nodded, but he still hoped. One day, someone would notice. Back to the present, that day finally came, and now. Every time someone walked through the front doors of that building, they saw James, not as a wall, not as background, but as a man who had stood tall for years, and now stood proud. It was a calm Friday morning. The building buzzed with quiet conversation. The receptionist smiled more now. Security staff stood taller. Employees brought coffee for interns. People noticed each other. Everything had changed, but no one expected what was about to happen next, because that morning, a woman no one recognized walked through the front doors, and she was looking for Mr. Reynolds. A quiet arrival, she wore a blue coat, carried a small bag, and walked with a slight limp. She didn't look like a businesswoman. No badge, no assistant, no loud entrance. But she walked with purpose. At the front desk, the new receptionist smiled. "Good morning, ma'am. You have an appointment." The woman nodded politely. "Tell Mr. Reynolds. The woman from the elevator is here." The receptionist blinked. "Elevator. That's all he'll need to hear," the woman said softly. "Maria gets the message." Maria was in her new office when the call came. She answered a moment later. Her face changed. She stood up fast and walked straight to Mr. Reynolds' office. She didn't knock, just opened the door gently. "There's someone downstairs," she said. He looked up. "Who?" she said. "She's the woman from the elevator." Everything stopped. A memory reawakens Meister. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, eyes suddenly distant. He remembered 10 years ago. A crowded hospital elevator. He was an exhausted intern. With barely enough money for food, a woman had collapsed just as the doors were closing. No one moved to help except him. He held her head, called for help, waited 2 hours by her side. Before she was taken into surgery, she looked up at him and whispered, "One day, I'll return the kindness." And now, she was here. They finally meet again. Moments later, Mr. Reynolds walked into the lobby there. She was older now, but still with the same gentle eyes. He smiled warmly. "You remember me?" she said softly. "How could I forget?" he replied. The entire lobby watched silently. Some were confused, others moved. In the private office, she sat down, removed her coat, and pulled out a worn leather notebook. "I never forgot that day," she said. "You stayed with me when no one else would. You didn't even know me." "You were in pain," Reynolds said. "That's all I needed to know." She opened the notebook and slid a paper across the table. It was a company stock certificate. Reynolds frowned. "What's this?" A gift. A hidden connection revealed the woman's name was Eleanor Marsh. She had once been the founder of a successful software company. She had sold it years ago, then quietly used her money to invest in smaller companies, especially ones that helped people. And 5 years ago, she invested in his company. Without telling him, I heard. "About your project," she explained. "A startup that helped young people get jobs. I recognized your name and remembered your face." "You believed in me?" he asked. She nodded. "I didn't know how else to repay you." The company was saved. Reynolds looked down at the document. It wasn't just a gift. It was one of the first major investments that saved his company in its early days. He looked back at her. Stunned. "You're the reason we survived," she smiled. "No, you're the reason. I just gave you the water. You grew the tree." The board learns the truth that afternoon. Mr. Reynolds called an emergency board meeting. The board members entered nervously. Lately, every surprise meeting had meant change or correction. Reynolds stood at the head of the table. "I'd like you all to meet someone," he said. Eleanor walked in slowly. Some of the board recognized her. "She was one of our earliest investors," Reynolds explained. "She saved this company when the banks said no." The room fell silent. One board member whispered, "We didn't even know." "You didn't ask," Reynolds replied calmly. A short speech. Eleanor stood and faced the room. "You think power comes from suits and money?" she said. "But real power is kindness. Real success is remembering those who helped you when you were nothing." She looked at Mr. Reynolds. "He remembered me. That's why he's fit to lead." The room clapped slowly, then faster. A new plaque in the lobby the next morning. A new plaque appeared on the wall beside the front doors, in honor of Eleanor Marsh, the woman from the elevator. She believed in one man when the world did not. That belief became a company. People read it every morning and remembered that a single kind act holding a stranger in an elevator had created a ripple that changed hundreds of lives. Back to the present, as Eleanor left the building, she hugged Mr. Reynolds one more time. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. He smiled. "I'm still learning, still growing." She looked at the building behind him and said, "You turned pain into purpose." And then she walked away, but her story stayed behind, etched in stone, etched in hearts, etched in elevators and memories. It started with a sandwich. Nothing special. It's just turkey and cheese. But where Mr. Reynolds chose to eat it would change the office forever. The company cafeteria. The company's cafeteria sat on the second floor. It had clean tables, bright lights, and long rows of chairs. But there were unwritten rules. The front right tables were for executives. The middle section, managers and team leads, and way in the back, near the vending machines, sat the quiet ones in turns, janitors, mailroom staff. No. One said these rules out loud, but everyone followed them. Until now, a quiet walk with a tray that afternoon. Mr. Reynolds walked into the cafeteria. People paused. He wasn't the type to eat. Here, CEOs usually had food brought to their offices, but he held a tray. Simple sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. He walked past the front tables, past the managers, all the way to the back, where a nervous intern named Ethan sat alone. Ethan looked up, eyes wide. Mr. Reynolds smiled. "Mind if I join you?" The entire cafeteria fell silent. Everyone watched as forks froze mid-dash air. One executive nearly choked on his salad. "Is that the CEO sitting with the mailroom intern?" People whispered. Some even stood to get a better view, but Mr. Reynolds didn't care. He opened a sandwich and looked at Ethan. "What's your story?" he asked casually. Ethan stammered. I just started last week." Reynolds smiled. "And we've got plenty to talk about."
Why he
"Did it later in a private meeting with Maria?" she asked. "Why did you sit back there today?" He looked out the window. "I remember my first job," he said. "I ate alone for weeks, not because I wanted to, because no one invited me." He paused. Sometimes power is used best when it sits beside the lonely. The ripple effect. Next day, something changed. A marketing director sat with two interns. A senior accountant joined the cleaning crew for lunch. Maria invited the IT staff to eat with her team. It wasn't forced. It was just happening. Walls were breaking. But not everyone liked it, Mr. Clive, the old-school executive, frowned as he watched from a distance. "This isn't how we've done things," he muttered. He walked over to Mr. Reynolds' office. "This lunch thing, it's distracting. People need to stay in their lanes." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "And what lane is that, Clive? The one where you sit at the top and forget what it's like down below?" Clive said nothing. "I'm not trying to make people equal in title," Reynolds continued. "I'm trying to make them equal in dignity." The empty table test a week later, Mr. Reynolds left a long table empty in the center of the cafeteria with a sign that read, "No titles at this table, just people." Some avoided it at first, but one day, a shy admin assistant sat there with her tray, then a mail clerk, then a software engineer. Soon, it became the busiest table in the room. People laughed louder there, shared ideas freely, and something magical happened. Departments started understanding each other. Flashback: a lonely meal years ago. A young Reynolds sat in a dark break room. He had his lunch in a plastic bag. No one talked to him. No one noticed him. He remembered thinking, if I ever become someone important, I'll never let another person eat alone. That memory stayed with him, and now he was keeping that promise. A letter from a janitor that evening. Mr. Reynolds found an envelope on his desk. Inside was a handwritten note. Sir, I've been here 7 years. No one ever sat next to me at lunch until today. You reminded me I'm not invisible. Thank you. Arlos Knight, janitor. He held the note for a long time, then framed it on the wall beside his desk. The cafeteria today now. When visitors came to the building, they didn't just see charts and numbers. They saw laughter across departments. They saw kindness. They saw the CEO sitting with the intern, the janitor talking to a director, and the HR team asking the delivery guy about his weekend. And when they asked, what kind of company is this? The answer was simple, the kind that remembers no. One deserves to eat alone. For weeks, the office had been changing. Walls both visible and invisible were coming down. People smiled more. Doors were held open. Team lunches were shared. But buried in the heart of the building, there was still one room untouched. No one had entered it in 5 years. Until now, Maria notices something strange. Maria was reviewing old building blueprints. When she frowned, she walked down the hallway on the 4th floor, counting doors. 1, 2, 3. Then she stopped. There should have been a 4th room here, but there was only a blank wall. She knocked on it. It sounded hollow. Something was behind it. She called maintenance. Was there ever a room here? She asked. The technician hesitated. Yeah, office for B. But it was sealed off years ago. No one ever said why. Permission from the top. Maria rushed to Mr. Reynolds' office. There's a hidden room, she said. On the 4th floor. Nobody's been in it. Mr. Reynolds stood up instantly. He didn't speak. He simply grabbed his keys. The door that was never opened. They reached the hallway. Wall panel near room 4A had been painted over. But behind the fresh paint, you could still see the outline of a door frame. The technician removed the panel, found an old keypad lock. Mr. Reynolds entered a universal override. Code. The door clicked. Dust fell, and the door opened slowly. With a long, creaking sound, inside the forgotten room, the air smelled of old papers and silence. Cobwebs hung from the corners. A single desk sat in the center. Folders piled on the shelves. An unplugged computer rested under a plastic cover. Mr. Reynolds stepped. Inside, it looked like time had frozen. He ran his fingers across a file cabinet labeled Confidential, Denied Applications. He opened a drawer. Hundreds of folders sat. Inside, each one was a rejected resume. The hidden truth. He pulled one out. Then another. Each file had been rejected for strange reasons. Too much volunteer work, not professional. Name sounds foreign. Dress style, not corporate. Age over 50. Criminal record, juvenile. Maria gasped. This isn't a storage room, she whispered. It's a graveyard, Mr. Reynolds said. A graveyard of dreams. His own file is there. He pulled a thick folder from the bottom drawer. His hands froze. It was his own resume, dated 5 years ago, stamped rejected, unfit for corporate culture. He sat down silent. Maria watched him carefully. What do we do? He looked up slowly. We tell the truth. The email that shocked the company that afternoon? A new message hit every inbox. Subject: the room nobody cleaned today. We opened a room that had been hidden for 5 years. Inside, we found the resumes of people who were never given a chance. Many were denied for reasons that go against everything we now stand for. Some were judged by names, clothes, age, or background. One of them was mine. We will no longer hide what was broken. We will learn from it. We will never seal another room again. R. Reynolds' reactions around the building. In the break room, people read the email in silence. One young employee whispered, "That could have been me." An older staff member said, "It was me." 10 years ago, they rejected me once. Came back under a different name. In the janitor's office. Carlos read the message twice and quietly nodded. He'd seen those files being taken into that room years ago, but was told to mind his business. Now he knew what they were hiding. A ceremony held a week later. Mr. Reynolds turned room for B into something new. A large glass window replaced the door. Inside, the rejected resumes were preserved, displayed. On the walls like art, a sign outside the room read, "The Room of Second Chances. We never again forget what potential looks like." Everyone in the company was invited to walk through. Some cried, some whispered, apologies, but all left changed. Flashback, a younger Reynolds 5. Yes. Years ago, Reynolds had waited for a callback that never came. He remembered standing outside this very building, feeling crushed, wondering what was wrong with him. Now he knew. Nothing was wrong with him, but something had been wrong with the system, and he had the power to fix it. A call to action later that evening, Mr. Reynolds met with the hiring team. He laid out a new rule. Every application must be reviewed by a panel of 3 different backgrounds. No resumes to be rejected without full review. And anyone previously rejected under old policies will be re-invited personally. Maria smiled. "We're not just changing rules," she said. He nodded. "We're changing hearts." One final note: as Mr. Reynolds left the building that night, he paused by the glass window of the new Room of Second Chances. He stared at the wall, and then, with a pen, he added a small note under his own rejected resume. "They said I didn't fit. I built something they couldn't ignore." He stepped back, looked at it, and smiled. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday. Coffee was hot. Computers hummed. Keyboards clicked. The building felt calm. But by 10:04 a.m., something happened that hadn't happened in over 15 years. Entire system crashed. Phones, emails, servers, even security doors. Gone, silent, dead, and no one knew why. Panic. Begins. The receptionist pressed the phone button again. No dial tone. Maria opened her laptop. Her screen blinked, then turned black. "Is it the Wi-Fi?" someone asked. "No," said the IT lead. "It's everything." The power lights stayed on. The Gavisa's system inside the building had failed. Worse, the backup server didn't turn on. Something was deeply wrong. The emergency meeting. Mr. Reynolds called an emergency meeting on the top floor. Senior staff rushed in. "Do we know what caused it?" he asked. The IT head shook his head. "Nothing from outside. No hack, no storm. Looks like a local system failure." "But the mainframe?" "Files are corrupted. How long to fix it?" "Days, maybe a week." The room went quiet. A board member whispered, "A week offline could cost us millions." Maria added, "And clients will lose trust." Mr. Reynolds stood still for a moment, then said something no one expected. "We're not panicking. We're asking who we haven't listened to yet." The man everyone forgot down in the basement. A quiet man named Waleed sat alone in a storage room. He was the hardware technician. Not officially part of it, not included in meetings. No one asked him for advice, but he had been there for 8 years. He knew the wiring, the power flow, the old server racks. Things the new team barely understood. When the company upgraded to newer systems 3 years ago, no one consulted him. They said, "Your work is outdated." It was pushed aside until today. Mr. Reynolds remembers. Mr. Reynolds stood silently by the window, then he turned to Maria, who was the last person to work on the original server room. Maria thought, then gasped. "Waleed, the hardware guy. Where is he now?" "In the basement. I think they moved him to supply tracking." Mr. Reynolds didn't wait. He went straight to the basement. A humble genius, he found Waleed sorting cables in a dark room with no windows. Waleed looked up surprised. "Sir?" Mr. Reynolds smiled. "We need your help." Waleed stood slowly. "Me, yes. The systems are down. No one can figure out why. But you know the old bones of this building. You worked on them. You built part of it. Waleed looked down. He stopped asking me. Reynolds put a hand on his shoulder.
House.
Then let's start asking again. The comeback within an hour, Waleed was in the server room dusty, half abandoned. He opened panels no one had touched in years. Here's the problem, he said. The new server system was layered on top of the old one, without fully disabling it. That's why they clashed. The old power grid rebooted itself and overrode everything. People blinked. He kept working. Give me 2 hours. Need full access. You got it, Reynolds said. The building watch's word spread. A man no one paid attention to was now in charge of saving the company. Employees peeked through the glass. One whispered, "That's Waleed." Another said, "I thought he was the janitor." No, man, he's the hardware genius they forgot. The lights come back at exactly 1:46 p.m. The phones lit up. The screens flickered on. Email alerts buzzed. Printers jumped to life. Cheers broke out on every floor, and at the center of it all stood Waleed, sweaty, dusty, and smiling quietly. The standing ovation, mister. Reynolds brought Waleed into the main conference room. The board was waiting. He introduced him. This man just saved the company. The room stood up and clapped. Some staff had tears in their eyes. Waleed looked around. Stunned. I just did what I know. Reynolds nodded. That's all it ever takes. New role that evening. A new message hit the inboxes. Subject: New position announcement. Please welcome Waleed Khan as our new Director of Systems. Infrastructure. We failed to see his value for too long. But we will never overlook people again. Knowledge has no rank. Wisdom has no age. From this day on, we rise by recognizing those who built the ground we stand on. People smiled as they read it. Some cried, and many walked down to the basement just to say thank you. Flashback. A closed door years ago, Waleed had once tried to share an idea in a meeting. The manager interrupted him. We've got smarter people for that. Waleed sat down, said nothing, and slowly disappeared from the company's radar. But not anymore. Final scene. A walk together that night, Mr. Reynolds and Waleed walked through the empty office halls together. Reynolds said, "How did it feel? Fixing what no one else could?" Waleed smiled. "Honestly, I wasn't fixing computers. I was fixing how they made me feel." Reynolds stopped and nodded. "Then we're rebuilding more than just systems." They walked on, side by side. As equals, the company was finally running smoothly again, after the crash, after the promotions, after the kindness. Things felt better than ever. But deep in the HR server, folder had just reappeared, one that was never meant to be found. Maria was the first to notice it. An unexpected notification. It started with a strange email. Subject: System recovery, orphan files restored. Maria clicked on it, expecting junk, but there it was, a folder titled Private. Exec 7 do not open, she frowned. Exec 7 was the old executive who had left 5 years ago. The same year Mr. Reynolds was rejected. She hovered her mouse. Her fingers shook slightly. Then she clicked, and what she saw made her cover her mouth in shock. Inside the folder there were videos, emails, voice recordings, documents stamped confidential. Shred after review. Most were labeled with employee names. Names of people who had either been fired unfairly or never hired at all. One document had the subject line, "Unspoken filters for hiring." Use discretion. It listed things like, avoid accents, customers don't trust them, no visible tattoos. Makes us look cheap. Single mothers, too many work absences. Overweight applicants, bad brand image. Maria felt sick, and then she saw the worst one. Reject Reynolds are too bold, talks back, could threaten the chain of command. She stared at the screen, frozen, then whispered, they buried him, ... on purpose. Decision to make. Printed a few pages, put them in a folder, and walked straight to Mr. Reynolds' office. But when she reached his door, she paused. What would this do to him? He had rebuilt everything with kindness. With forgiveness? If he saw these files now, would it break that? Would it make him angry? Would he want revenge? Or worse, would he lose faith in everything? A conversation with herself that night. Maria sat at her kitchen table, staring at the folder. She called her sister. "What do you do," she asked, "when you find truth that could hurt, but also help?" Her sister replied gently, "If you found a wound, you clean it." Maria hung up. She knew what she had to do. The morning meeting, she placed the folder on Mr. Reynolds' desk. He looked up, curious. "What's this?" She sat down across from him and said quietly, "It's the truth." He opened it slowly, read one page, then another, then it's the one about himself. He didn't speak for a full minute, then whispered, "So they did it on purpose." Maria nodded. "Didn't want to show you, but I knew you'd want to know." He closed the folder carefully, then looked out the window. The choice, Maria asked. "What now? Do we go public? Expose the old board?" Mr. Reynolds turned slowly. "We don't hide it," he said, "but we don't use it for revenge." He stood. "We use it to teach, to protect." "To show what we'll never do again?" Maria asked. "How?" He smiled. "We tell the story. The full story." The company-wide broadcast later that day, all screens in the company flickered on. A live video began. Mr. Reynolds appeared on screen. His face was calm, serious. "Today we uncovered documents from the past. They showed how people were judged unfairly, silently, cruelly, not by their talent, but by things they could not change." He paused. "I was one of them. I was told I didn't fit, but instead of breaking, I built, and now I stand here not to punish, but to promise." He looked straight into the camera. "This company will never again filter out human potential. We'll judge by kindness, strength, and skill, not by bias, fear, or image. From today forward, we create a place where everyone matters, because we remember what it felt like. When we didn't, response phones didn't ring for a while. No one spoke. They just listened. And for the first time, many employees realized, this company isn't just changing rules. It's healing wounds." The empty office later that week. Mr. Reynolds walked into the room where Exec 7 once worked. It was empty now. He sat in the same chair that once belonged to the man who blocked his path. He looked around and said quietly, "I forgive you. But I won't forget." He stood and locked the door behind him, not to hide truth, not to keep it remembered. A new file created. Maria opened a new digital folder on the company drive. She labeled it, "We choose to remember." Inside, she uploaded every document they had found. No password, no hiding, just a note attached. "If you ever wonder why we are different, read these and then keep being better." Final scene, a letter from a stranger. A week later, Mr. Reynolds received a handwritten letter. "Sir, I applied here 5 years ago. I was rejected. I thought something was wrong with me. But then I saw your speech, and I cried. You made me feel human again. Thank you for telling the truth, TL." Placed the letter beside Carlos's thank you note and whispered, "This is why we fight." After the old files were made public, the building felt different, lighter, warmer. People smiled more, spoke softer, helped faster, but none of them knew that a quiet janitor had been guiding them long before Mr. Reynolds ever became CEO, and they were about to discover how. A locker that hadn't been touched started during a storage room cleanup. Carlos, the night janitor, was helping the facilities team reorganize old lockers that hadn't been opened in years. One of the lockers had no name on it. The key had been lost long ago. "I think this was Mr. Elijah's," Carlos said, dusting it off. He retired. "It's been 8 years now." They used bolt cutters to open it. Inside, a faded jacket, a pair of old work shoes, and a notebook with torn edges. On the cover, written in shaky handwriting, "For the one who cares enough to read, Maria gets the notebook." Carlos brought the notebook straight to Maria. She opened it slowly. The pages were full of handwriting, old but clear. Each page had a short message, a lesson, or a story. Some were funny, some were painful. All were deeply human. The words that moved her, Maria read. One note aloud, "If you ever run a place like this, always smile at the one mopping your floor. They see everything, and they never forget how you made them feel." Another one, "Sometimes the person who refills your paper towels has the best business idea in the building. But no one ever asks. Them, and one more. The building may be owned by the company, but the soul belongs to the people who clean it at night. Maria sat back, eyes wet. These aren't just notes, she whispered. They're a guidebook. Mr. Reynolds reads the notebook later that evening. She brought it to Mr. Reynolds as he stayed in his office and read it cover to cover. The final page had a small letter. To whoever finds this, maybe I wasn't important enough to be in meetings, but I watched, and I hoped, and I believed that someday someone kind would walk into this building and finally lead with heart. If that person is you, don't forget the ones like me. Elijah, janitor, 32 years of service. Mr. Reynolds closed the book slowly and wiped his eyes. A company announcement the next morning. An email was sent to everyone. Subject: Wisdom from the broom closet this week. He found a notebook left behind by Mr. Elijah Janitor, who worked here for over 3 decades. Inside were lessons, memories, reminders. He never asked to be seen, but he saw all of us. We are turning his words into a wall of wisdom, a place where his voice will guide us every day. Let this be our reminder. Quiet people often carry the loudest truths. The wall of wisdom. By the end of the week, a large wall near the cafeteria had been transformed. It had 10 framed quotes from Elijah's notebook, each one written in big, bold letters. Employees stood there in silence. Some took pictures, some wiped. Tears, one intern whispered, "I wish I could have met him." Carlos, standing behind her, smiled. "You already have." Every time someone treated you with kindness in this building, a piece of Elijah was there. Flashback. Young Carlos and Elijah. Years ago, Carlos was 19, just starting as a part-time cleaner. One night, after spilling chemicals and nearly quitting, Elijah sat beside him and said, "Son, don't let the silence make you feel small. People who clean in the dark often carry the brightest light." That night, Carlos didn't quit. Years later, he would become the one to find Elijah's notebook. Mr. Reynolds creates a new program in Elijah's honor. Mr. Reynolds started a new training series called the Silent Leaders Project. It focused on listening to junior staff learning. From behind the scenes, workers creating safe spaces for hidden voices. New manager was required to read Elijah's top 20 quotes and share one in every meeting. A new culture is born soon. Elijah's words started appearing everywhere. On elevator screens inside the lobby, even printed on coffee cups. People quoted him like a famous author, because that's what he was. A silent author of kindness. A leader no one sound till now. Final scene, a young man with a notebook one morning. An intern named Yalen sat near the wall of wisdom. He stared at the quote. Don't wait for permission to make someone feel seen. He pulled out a notebook of his own and wrote, Today I saw a woman cry after reading Elijah's words. Think I want to write like that too someday. And so, another notebook began. It was early morning. The lobby lights were dim. The building was quiet, but something was different. An email had gone out just 30 minutes earlier. Subject: All staff report to the lobby at 9 a.m. Sharp, no explanation. No reason, just a request from Mr. Reynolds himself. And now, everyone was gathering. No one knew why. The lobby fills with questions. Executives stood beside janitors. Interns stood beside senior staff. Marketing, finance, tech, security, HR. All of them were there. Side by side, Maria stood near the glass staircase. Notebook in hand. Carlos looked up from the corner, already sensing something big. Whispers floated through the air. Is someone getting fired? Is this about the files? Why are we all here? Did something go wrong again? Exactly, 9 a.m. The elevator doors opened, and Mr. Reynolds stepped out, holding a black folder. The room fell silent. He stood without a Mitch, didn't use a microphone. He didn't raise his voice, but somehow, everyone heard him. He walked to the center of the lobby and began, Years ago, this building didn't feel like it does today. There was silence where there should have been celebration. There was distance between floors, between people. There were names, forgotten, ignored, or never spoken at all. He opened the black folder and looked down. Today, I speak them. The list no one expected one by one. He began reading. Annika Thomas rejected twice for being a single mother. She now leads our parent support team. Miguel Rivera overlooked due to an accent. He just finished his third successful software launch. Priya Das told her hijab didn't match the brand. She's now head of global partnerships. Carlos Mendez seen only as the night janitor. But he taught us how to see with more than our eyes. Whispers turned to gasps. His eyes turned to tears. Mr. Reynolds didn't stop. He kept reading page after page. Names of people who were once dismissed, ignored, or hidden, but who had now become the heart of the company. He spoke about himself to he, paused midway, then said, and me. Robert Reynolds, rejected in 2018, labeled too bold, not a good fit. I stand before you now, not for revenge, but to remind you, no system is too broken to rebuild. Faces in the crowd. Maria felt her chest tighten. Tears welled up in her eyes. Carlos placed a hand over his heart. A young intern looked up at the ceiling, whispering, "Thank you." Even the old executive, Mr. Clive, stood in the back, arms crossed, but his face had softened. A final name, Mr. Reynolds flipped to the last page. His voice lowered, and finally, Elijah J. Brown, janitor, poet, silent leader. Left behind a notebook that now guides this building. Elijah never asked for applause, but today, he gets it. He looked up and clapped. Once, twice, soon. The whole building joined in, clapping for a man who wasn't there. But who had led them all the same? A promise spoken out loud. The clapping faded. Mr. Reynolds took a breath and spoke one last time. From this day on, no name goes unnoticed. No talent goes unspoken. No story is too small to be heard. Because when we speak their names, we honor their worth. New plaques on the wall that afternoon. A new wall was revealed in the lobby, engraved into metal. The names we once missed, the voices we now rise. With dozens of names were listed. Next to each one, a title they now held. And a note of how they had once been overlooked. It wasn't just decoration. It was truth. It was healing. It was justice. A message spreads. Photos. The wall went viral online. People began commenting. This is what leadership looks like. Speak my name one day. I've never seen a company do this. But inside the building wasn't about attention. It was about dignity. Flashback. A boy watching his dad years ago. A 12-year-old Robert Reynolds watched his father, a warehouse worker, be ignored at a company dinner. He remembered whispering, "Why didn't they say your name?" His father smiled sadly. Because some people don't think workers need names. That moment stayed with him forever. Until today, when he made sure every name was spoken. Final scene. A new list begins later that night. Maria sat at her desk with a fresh document open. Title, names to notice next. It wasn't official, but she had a plan to keep listening, to keep watching, to make sure no name ever disappeared again. Some of the biggest changes in a company don't happen during meetings. They happen in silence, in forgotten rooms, or in whispers no one is meant to. Here, one such whisper would shake Mr. Reynolds to the core. The door to the old break room. The break room on the third floor hadn't been used in years. Most employees preferred the new open lounge downstairs. But on that rainy Thursday afternoon, Mr. Reynolds walked upstairs looking for a quiet place to make a call. His phone had no signal, so he stepped toward the old break room, hoping to use the landline inside. He reached for the door, but then he paused inside. He heard two voices, young, nervous, whispering. The conversation that wasn't meant to be heard. "I don't think I belong here," one said. "Everyone looks so confident. You kidding?" The second replied. "Half the time I'm just pretending." The first voice cracked. "Today I was asked to give input in a meeting. My hands shook so much I dropped my notebook." Pause. Did they laugh? No. But I saw the smirks. Silence again. Then, "I wish someone up there actually cared." Like really cared, not just in emails and speeches. Mr. Reynolds froze. His heart sank. This wasn't anger, it was something deeper. Loneliness. He walks away silently, He didn't open the door. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there, hands still on the doorknob, listening and learning. When the voices faded, he stepped back, quietly returned to his office, and sat down in silence. For the first time in weeks, he felt heavy. Reflection in the glasses rain tapped the windows. He looked out across the city. We've changed so much, he whispered to himself, but not enough. Then he turned to his whiteboard and wrote one sentence: they don't need more speeches. They need someone to stand beside them. A surprise invitation the next morning. Every intern and entry-level employee received a short email. Subject: a seat at the table. You are invited to a private session this Friday at 2 p.m. No pressure. No tests. Just an open seat at the leadership table. Come as you are. Robert Reynolds, CEO. The room fills with nerves on Friday at 2 p.m. The big boardroom filled with young, nervous faces. They looked around at the long table. The big chairs, the bright lights. Some held notebooks, some clutched coffee cups like shields. Then the door opened, and Mr. Reynolds walked in carrying a tray of cookies. He placed them on the table, sat down, and smiled. No agenda, he said. Just talk. About anything. Tell me what you see, what you feel, what you need. The room slowly comes alive at first. No one spoke. Then one young woman raised her hand shyly. I think some of us feel like we're not seen. Another nodded. I'm afraid to ask questions. What if I sound stupid? A man near the end added. Sometimes we look up at leadership and it just feels unreachable. Mr. Reynolds listened carefully. No judgment, no defense, just listening. A new kind of mentorship that evening. He launched a program called Side by Side. Every executive was paired with a junior employee, not to supervise, but to learn from them. Lunches, walks, shadowing days, no fancy rules. Just connection. 1 day a week. Corner offices were left empty because leadership was out walking beside their assigned partners. Impact. Across the company, an intern from accounting shared an idea that helped save $12,000 a month. A marketing assistant helped the crew improve communication with Gen Z clients. A delivery staffer taught a tech manager how to simplify reports. The company wasn't just growing, it was bonding. The whisper turned into a letra. A few weeks later, a note appeared on Mr. Reynolds' desk. Handwritten, no name. Dear sir, we were the two voices behind the door. You didn't interrupt. You listened. And then you changed everything. I'll never forget that. Thank you. Still whispering, but stronger now. Flashback. A young Reynolds at his first job. He had once been that nervous kid, terrified to speak in meetings. He remembered standing behind a copy machine, whispering to a friend, I don't think I belong here. No one heard him back then, but today. He had heard someone else, and it had made all the difference. Final scene. A new sign on the break room door later that week. The old break room on the 3rd floor was renovated, but instead of fancy furniture, it had small tables, books, soft lights, and a new name above the door. The listening room below it. A quote, whispers matter too. Let's never forget to hear them. The company had changed. From the outside, it looked like a successful business, but from the inside, it had become something more. A home. A place where the quiet were heard, the forgotten were honored. Overlooked were lifted, but no one expected what would happen next. Not even Maria. Not even Carlos. Because on a rainy Monday morning, Mr. Reynolds didn't walk into the building instead. He left behind an envelope. The empty office at 8:02 a.m. Maria entered Mr. Reynolds' office to drop off documents, but something felt wrong. His chair was empty. His favorite mug was gone. The light on his desk was off, and sitting at the center of his desk was a white envelope with one name written on the front, to everyone who believed. She opens the letter. Maria held the letter in both hands. She hesitated. Then she called Carlos and the board members into the office. Together, they opened it inside. A folded piece of paper and a flash drive. Maria began to read the letter aloud. The goodbye letter to those who stood with me. If you're reading this, I've stepped away not in sadness, but in peace. This company doesn't need me to survive anymore. It has grown beyond my leadership. It has learned to lead itself with kindness, courage, and listening. I came here once as a man who was told he wasn't good enough. Lie. Now leave. As someone who knows his name will never be forgotten. And not because I was loud, but because I listened. Please don't be sad. I didn't quit. I simply made space for someone else to rise. The flash drive holds one last message. Share it with the building, and then keep going. This story was never about me. It was always about you. Robert Reynolds, the final video message. They plugged the flash drive into the main system. Screens all over the building lit up. And there he was, Mr. Reynolds, smiling gently, sitting in a quiet park. If you're watching this, I'm gone. But I want to leave you with 3 final things. He held up one finger. First, never confuse silence with weakness. Some of the strongest people barely speak, but they move mountains with quiet hands. Second finger. Second, the janitor might be your next teacher. The intern might have your next big idea. Stay humble. Third finger. And finally, speak people's names. Tell them they matter, not just in promotions, but in every hallway. Every email, every smile. He paused, then added softly, "You made this place beautiful now. Keep building." The screen faded to black, but no one moved. Some were crying. Some were smiling. All were remembering the response that afternoon. The company gathered in the lobby. No speech was given, just one simple action. Each person walked to the wall where names were engraved and added a thank you note under Mr. Reynolds. Name, handwritten, personal, dozens of them. Soon, hundreds. Carlos leaves a note. Carlos stood in front of the wall, holding a small piece of paper. He stuck it gently below Mr. Reynolds' name. It read, "You saw me before anyone else did. Spend the rest of my life doing the same for others." Maria steps up with the support of the board. Maria was quietly named the next CEO. She didn't change much because the foundation was strong. She simply added one rule. Every leader must spend 1 day a month doing someone else's job, not to supervise, just to remember. And so they did. Interns trained directors, janitors led HR teams. Everyone became a teacher, and everyone became a student. Flashback, the man at the door years ago, a black man in a clean suit stood outside the glass doors. The receptionist ignored him. Security walked toward him. No one knew. The man would change everything, that he would fire the toxic roots and plant new seeds and walk away. Not as a hero, but as a gardener who left behind a garden full of blooming people. Final scene, a young girl at the wall months later. A group of school children visited the building for a field trip. One little girl stopped in front of the wall of names. She looked up at the grown-ups. Who was Robert Reynolds? She asked. Carlos bent down and smiled. He was the man who made sure no one ever waited outside again.